Are your knives struggling to make clean cuts? Perhaps you're worried about damaging your edges during sharpening. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to consistently hold an accurate angle so you can make sure your knives are ready for anything. Tom here at Sharpening Supplies, and whether you're a beginner or you've got some experience with sharpening, the key to getting a perfect edge every time is being able to hold a consistent angle. Now, trust me, it's a lot easier than you think once you get the hang of it. If you're not sure on what angle to pick, then this video should be able to help you out. Now, these tips aren't the only way to hold a consistent angle. These are just some things that I've picked up during my years of sharpening. There are plenty of other ways to get the same results. In fact, if you're an experienced sharpener watching this, I would love to hear if you've got any different methods that you use to maintain a consistent angle while sharpening. So my first tip, it will start with how you grip the knife. The way that I like to do it is I like to hold the knife with the edge facing towards me. I will put my thumb on the side of the blade near the edge, and I'll extend my forefinger along the spine of the blade. The thumb allows me to put some downward pressure while I'm sharpening, and then having that finger extended along the back adds a little bit of stability to it. Now, when I change sides to the knife, I like to switch hands, so I'll mirror the same grip in my other hand. I find that's a bit easier to continue sharpening while dealing with bolsters compared to flipping the knife over. If you prefer to flip the knife over, then the grip that I would suggest would just have your thumb along the spine of the blade and then your forefinger towards the edge there. So with your non-dominant hand, you want to place that on the side of the blade to put a bit of downward pressure on it. Any fingers that aren't in contact with the blade, you want to make sure they're raised up to keep them away from the edge in case you slip. Tip number 2 would be to make sure that you lock your wrist. Your wrist can move in a lot of different directions, and so it can be really easy to accidentally change the angle if you don't make sure your wrist is locked. Part of the reason why I extend my forefinger is that it makes it really easy for me to see that there's a straight line that extends from my elbow through my arm and to the tip of the knife. If my wrist starts to move, it's easy to see if that straight line gets broken. Once your wrist is locked into position, then tip number 3 is to sharpen using big body movements. So if you're standing, then you can sharpen using your legs. If you're seated, you can sharpen using your core muscles. This allows you to hold your hands and arms in a locked position and use those big body movements to move the knife back and forwards. Don't feel like sharpening using just your arms is some sort of advanced technique you need to graduate to. The whole goal is to get a sharper edge, not to look cool while doing it, unless you live your life on the internet like I do. You didn't have to laugh at that, David. So then tip number 4, and this is especially useful for knives that are a little bit longer, and that would be to break the sharpening into sections of the edge. So you don't have to sharpen the full edge with each pass. You can hold the knife at one angle and concentrate on sharpening just that section before moving on. I would recommend that when you get to the end of the section, if you've raised a burr, to maybe try 1 or 2 strokes where you do sharpen the full length of the edge, just to try and blend those sections together. And then tip number 5 is about the tip. So most knives, the edge is pretty straight by the handle, but then it will curve up towards the tip. So we need to change the height of the handle as we sharpen in order to keep the tip in contact with the stone. So we can see that quite clearly if we hold the knife perpendicular to the stone, that we'll need to raise the handle in order to get the tip to touch the stone. And the same is true for when we're holding our knife at the sharpening angle. We still need to raise that handle a little bit in order for the tip to come into contact with the stone at the correct angle. And this is where the previous tip, tip number 4, comes in handy. Rather than trying to raise the handle in a dynamic motion, you can just raise the handle, concentrate on sharpening the tip, and then keep going until you've sharpened that full curved section. And then here's a bonus tip for making sure that you are sharpening at a consistent angle, and that is the marker method. If you color the bevel in with a marker, then you'll be able to see where you're removing material from the edge. If you're removing the marker just from the very edge of the bevel, then you're holding the knife at too high of an angle and you'll need to lower it a little bit. If you're removing marker from the back of the bevel away from the edge, then you're holding it at too low of an angle and you'll need to raise it a little bit. Go back and forth to try and find that perfect sweet spot. You can do the same thing by just inspecting the scratch pattern left by the stone, but the marker just makes it a lot easier to see where that material is being removed. So I'd love to hear in the comments. Let me know if you like using the marker method or if there's something else that you use to check to make sure that your angle remains consistent. So there are a few common mistakes that I want to go over so you can avoid them. And the first one we've kind of mentioned already, and that is just moving your wrist. It's really common to see beginners moving their wrist while sharpening. Make sure that that wrist is locked. Another mistake is rushing the process. If you go too fast, it's hard to maintain that consistent angle. Precision will beat speed any day when it comes to sharpening. And then the last mistake would be using too fine a grit. I recommend starting with a coarse grit. That way you can create a new edge a lot quicker with far fewer passes of the knife, so you don't have to maintain that consistent angle for quite so long. Sharpening is a skill that takes a while to master, so don't get discouraged if your first few attempts aren't perfect. Just keep practicing and you'll be sharpening like a pro in no time. So thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and that will help other people find this video. If you enjoy our content, then please subscribe so you don't miss out on future sharpening content.